the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, Ruslan Stefanchuk. So let me give the floor to the Speaker of the Czech Chamber of Deputies. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The main message of the second parliamentary summit of the International Crimea Platform is that we stand united by Ukraine, and we will stand united as long as needed, because what is at stake is peace also in other parts of the world. We fully realize that Ukraine is sacrificing its lives for us as well. There are many civilians and soldiers dying to defend their country, but also to try to prevent the spillover of that conflict across the border. We have met as representatives of over 50 countries and various interparliamentary groups, and they all spoke the same language. The first summit took place last year in Zagreb, and this year the second summit hosted 7 more countries, not only EU countries, but we also had representatives of Sierra Leone, Ghana, Canada, and the United Kingdom. So we had representatives of countries that either joined us for the second summit or have been with us since the beginning. I think it's the main message that we're sending out to the aggressor, to dictator, Mr. Putin, who sees that we stand united, and we will continue helping and supporting Ukraine till the very last moment, until the whole territory, sovereign territory of Ukraine, is fully returned to Ukraine, because there are no doubts that Crimea is Ukraine, and we want to reach a situation that Crimea is liberated, just like all the other parts of Ukraine where they're currently fighting. Let me also tell you that throughout today we've heard contributions of individual representatives of parliaments, speakers and deputy speakers and so on, but we also heard the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic, and we also had a video greeting of President Zelensky, who joined us online. He established this platform. He is the one who established this International Crimea Platform to remind all of us that the war in Ukraine started back in 2014 and not in 2022. The Crimea Platform was established back in 2021, actually, to remind us of what happened and what is still happening. On the occupied territories, the human rights are still being violated, and it hits all generations. There are children being kidnapped and brought to Russia or Belarus that also takes part in all these crimes. More than 4,000 children were kidnapped from Ukraine, taken to Crimea. They're re-educated, they're brainwashed, and it's yet another war crime that Russia, as a terrorist state, keeps committing. And we should remember that this is all happening not far away from us, and all these crimes, all these acts have to be punished. So in our joint declaration, we're calling on all the actors, all the stakeholders, to bring the perpetrators to justice. That's a very important aspect of today's summit. I'd like to say a big thank you to Speaker Stefanchuk for joining forces. The Ukrainian Parliament and the Czech Parliament joined forces and managed to organize this event, which was not easy. And thanks to everyone in the organization teams, everything went smooth. And the cyber attack that we have experienced at many targets in the Czech Republic only proves how important this event is, and how the Russian occupants really do not want to see such events. Thank you. And now the floor goes to Mr. Stefanchuk.
Thank you very much, my dear friends. Let me start by words of thanks, words of gratitude to a huge friend of Ukraine, the Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies of the Czech Republic, Markéta Pekarová Adamová, Thank you very much for all the wonderful work that you've put into organizing this conference. My thanks go to the Senate, to the President of the Czech Senate, and may I use this opportunity to also thank the Czech nation for all the solidarity that it has been expressing to us, not only in this meeting room, but also in the streets of Prague. We didn't spend the entire day speaking only about Crimea or only about Ukraine. In fact, we have discussed the future of the whole world. Any false narratives saying that the interest in Ukraine is waning, this false narrative has been dispelled. Just consider, representatives of 70 parliaments from 5 continents have waged their way to Prague to speak about the future of the world. I wanted to use this opportunity to thank once again for a wonderful organization. The spirits were very high, the energy was great in the meeting room. We were able to listen to words of support, but not only were we able to listen to them, we could feel physically that the support is rising. I wanted to thank all the participants who have come to this conference. Thank you very much for raising such issues as territorial integrity of Ukraine, Russian sanctions. Thank you very much for also speaking about a compensation mechanism for damage caused by Russia in Ukraine. We had representatives of all continents present in this meeting discussing these important issues. Speaking of narratives, there is another point I'd like to make. We've heard at this conference that Ukraine will be supported for as long as it takes, and what more, for as long as it takes for it to prevail. Ukrainian President Zelensky took part in this conference. In fact, he is the author of a peace plan supported by most countries. It'll be national parliaments who will make crucial decisions to pursue this plan. It is the parliaments that are putting pressure on governments so that governments would take important steps to implement this plan. So thank you very much, everyone. And once again, my biggest thanks go to Markéta Pekarová-Adamová. May I also use this opportunity to thank the Czech nation for all their support. Times are tough for them as well, yet they're standing behind Ukraine. They're standing by Ukraine. We are sure that the Czech Republic will spare no effort in making sure that Ukraine will win and prevail. This day marks 20 months since the beginning of this full-scale aggression against Ukraine. We've heard an alarm going off in Kiev, and we discussed the future of Ukraine, but I'm sure that our message will be heard by the soldiers in the trenches, as well as anyone else who wants to live in a way that upholds international human rights. So thank you. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? If you want a question, please raise your hand. We'll have somebody bring you a microphone. The first question is from Czech TV. Yes. Speakers, I'm glad to be able to hear you if I don't see you. And I wanted to ask about the confiscation of Russian property that is currently frozen in Western states and its use for the reconstruction of Ukraine. So something that you discussed. Speaker Adamová, may I ask whether the Czech Republic is going to wait for a common European position, or will it go it alone like some Baltic states? And a question to all of you, to both of you, despite all the legal problems that it may have, do you feel that perhaps there is a lack of support by Western nations?
Thank you. I think that it is important to wait for the joint solution and be active in attempts to achieve it as soon as possible and to contribute with our own experience. And of course, in the Czech Republic, it concerns a huge volume of assets that are frozen in the Czech Republic and could be used to reconstruct Ukraine, to reconstruct the damaged infrastructure and so forth. We do attempt to come up with our own proposals, but I think that the joint European solution, just as we have joint European solutions for the sanctions, should be given priority. So that will be a solution that cannot be challenged in any way, because of course we can expect reactions to our acts. So it is important that we stand united, that we see our common objective, and many countries represented here have been helping on various levels, not just by providing political support through, for example, a joint declaration that we adopted today, but we also moved from words to acts. We sent humanitarian aid to Ukraine. We also help refugees that came to our countries. And let me highlight, we also help in military efforts of Ukraine. We provide military help, and we heard about it a number of times today. And it's not just to help Ukraine, but it's also to provide for security of various parts of the world, because the conflict in Ukraine impacts not just Europe, but also other parts of the world through blocking various transport channels, for example, the grain corridor. It has an impact on Africa, for example, and other countries. But when it comes to violating international law, of course, this conflict has an impact on the whole of the world. It is impossible that we tolerate that anybody uses force to occupy somebody else's territory. And that is a message that we have to send out from meetings like the one that we had today, and we have to stick to it as well in our own countries, because of course Russia tries to deny all this through huge propaganda.
It was also forwarded to you, and please feel free to answer in your native language. Do you think, according to your estimation, that the Western countries do enough in order to fulfill the Crimean platform targets?
Знаєте, звичайно, Україні хотілося би, щоб та допомога.
Well, you know, Ukraine definitely would wish that we receive a bigger support, because there are many people that say that they expected more, for example, from the counteroffensive, Ukrainian counteroffensive. But, you know, counteroffensive, it is not a computer game. We cannot waste the lives of our soldiers. We cannot just throw them away. Of course, we would wish to have more arms and ammunition, more weapons, and we would like to strengthen our air defense. Because, as you can see, Russia continues to destroy our energy infrastructure. They also target civilian buildings, such as schools, kindergartens, hospitals. And as I see it, one of the outcomes of this summit is that Ukraine will receive more help and a wider support. So please continue supporting Ukraine until our victory. Ukrainian soldiers are strongly motivated. When I visit other countries, I always try to visit various training centers, military training centers, where our soldiers go and train. And I always hear that our soldiers are highly motivated. Well, of course, because they fight for their families, for their parents, for their children. So I think it's definitely worth it to provide more systemic support to Ukraine, because then you will see stronger outcomes. And I think that we've shown not once in the past that we can achieve outcomes at the battlefield, and this summit will help.
Дякую. Сергій Стасенко, Радіо Свобода. У мене запитання до пана Стефанчука. Як відомо від представництва президента в авто...
Thank you very much. As we have heard from the representative of the Republic of Crimea, there are currently 181 political prisoners, of which 15 are journalists. And I know that Russia and Ukraine are trading prisoners of war. So are you planning on trading these people as well? Thank you very much. Sorry, I don't think I'll be able to answer your question fully, but may I just say that your question bears on a very important question of the health and safety of Ukrainians, not only Ukrainian soldiers. The Ukrainian government is sparing no effort to make sure that Ukrainian citizens, be they fighting, be they deported or be they captive, could return home as quickly as possible. For instance, via exchange of prisoners. So we'll see, these programs will continue into the future and hopefully will also affect those Ukrainian citizens that have been held captive in the Russian Federation illegally. Primarily, we're concerned with the fate of Ukrainian children and soldiers that are currently held captive in Russia, and we're sparing no efforts in liberating them.
Prosím.
With recent developments in the world in Israel and Hamas, Washington is in a state of turmoil right now. As a publication that lands on people's desks, Congress and members of embassies in Washington, D.C. and in New York, what words do you have for how diplomats, how politicians can further isolate Russia and increase the likelihood of a Ukrainian victory, number one? And also, as members of the media, especially biased ones like me who would like to help Ukraine, what can we do to support you in this victory that you will have?
If I may, I will ask for the first question. Then I would follow just the words of Mr. President Biden, because, and we should follow all of us, because it's absolutely true that Hamas and Russia are different aggressors, but the aim is the same. And this has to be on our mind when we are doing all the political decisions, because what is in stake is democracy, our values on freedom and human rights, not only in Ukraine, not only in Israel, but all over the world. And we should protect it by ourselves. It's up to us. Nobody else can do it.
Дякую. Я теж, якщо дозвольте, декілька слів хотів би сказати про ту ситуацію, яка сьогодні.
Thank you. And if I may, I would like to say a few words about the situation that we now witness in Middle East. A few days ago in Ireland, I met with Amir Khan, who's the Speaker of the Israeli Knesset. And I openly told him that we would welcome a stronger support from the side of Ukraine, from the side of Israel towards Ukraine. Otherwise, the conflict can spill over the borders. So wherever you have a hot center, it can spill over. And the evil wages war on the good ones. And whoever is on the good side has an only option and to follow just one direction, and that is to join forces with the others and show to the rest of the world that democratic values are worth fighting for. We must not allow that this struggle between dictatorship and democracy, dictatorship prevails, because then other countries will say to themselves, well, okay, so this is the way to shape our regimes, to act, and we must not allow that mankind returns back to the 12th century, when it was the strength that prevailed, not the law that prevailed.
You are making a great job when you are covering the situation in Ukraine, and I would like to thank all the brave journalists all over the world. They are doing this because it's as well not something we should take as granted, and I just would like to encourage to keep doing it.
Аналогічно я хочу сказати, що одна з перших жертв, яку відчули ми у Верховній Раді, це була загибель.
I just wanted to say that one of the first victims that we heard about in our Verkhovna Rada was a journalist. And he was killed nearby Kyiv. So media do a very important work. It's a very important job that you're doing, and you're providing people with right information, with correct information. And we must be aware of the fact that it is not just the good and evil fighting against each other, but it's also a fight against Russian propaganda, because Russian propaganda very actively intervenes with the lives of many countries, and they have many narratives that they're promoting. And that's why I would like to call on you, journalists, because your work is very respected, highly respected, and very important. And I want you to challenge these narratives, which are lies, of course. Face them, challenge them, because they represent a threat to national security. I, for example, spoke to my colleague, Mr. Sobotka, from the Austrian Parliament, and also with Mr. McCartney, and they both told me how important artificial intelligence is, because artificial intelligence is used in spreading propaganda. And we have to learn to use modern tools in our fighting against propaganda.
CNN Prima News. I have a question about the elections, parliamentary elections and presidential elections in Ukraine next year. The situation is complicated. Will you be able to hold elections? I know that there have been some comments about the high cost of elections, and I wonder whether the European Union would be able to support the election process in Ukraine. Thank you. I'll let Ruslan Stefanchuk answer, because this is a Ukrainian matter. This is up to the internal legislation in Ukraine. Obviously, when it comes to parliamentary elections, there is a possibility to not hold elections, to not hold parliamentary elections, just let the parliament continue. This is not the case for presidential elections. But in general terms, I think that the biggest problem isn't going to be money. The biggest issue is going to be how to make sure that everybody can participate in elections. Soldiers have the right to vote, but they are at the front. Refugees have the right to vote. They're all over the world, several million of them. So we need to take account of all these factors. if we were to hold elections as scheduled. And the second issue concerns security during elections. If we have millions of voters going to the polls, then the polling rooms could easily become a target for the aggressor. Unfortunately, I can imagine how brutally cynical the Russian government could be in pursuing such attacks. We know that they don't shy away from bombing civilian targets such as hospitals and maternity wards, schools, and so forth. So this would be a pretty high risk. Russia could also use it to intimidate anyone who would want to vote in these elections. So obviously it's up to the Ukrainians to make that decision. I would appeal that we show understanding if they decide not to hold parliamentary elections. And because of the state of emergency, basically the current members of parliaments would continue holding the office.
To organize the upcoming presidential elections.
Or the parliamentary elections as
Yes.
well.
Sorry, I practically understand everything that you're talking, but you were so fast that I can't translate. But I understood in common. Я насамперед тут хочу подякувати за це питання.
Thanks. As I said, you were pretty fast, otherwise I probably would have understood. Anyway, let me tell you this. This is a question that I get wherever I go abroad. Ukraine is a democracy. Ukraine continues to be a democracy. Elections are an important factor of democracy. Elections are important to make sure that our power evolves. We have scheduled both parliamentary and presidential elections. There are 5 or 6 big challenges. The first one is how to make sure that our soldiers can vote. Now imagine elections without the votes of soldiers. Could you call those elections fair? Soldiers have the right to vote and to run for office. And the second issue was mentioned by Marketa already. We have 7 million refugees. And we have to make sure that these 7 million people can vote. The third issue is how to organize elections on territories that are temporarily under the control of the enemy. Another problem is a financial one. Any cent that we have, we spend on our armed forces. And then there's another important issue. Namely, we have to make sure that citizens have free access to media. But at the same time, we have to make sure that our media are not abused by Russia, who could spread their narrative and their lies. I mean, there are many more issues that we have to face, but if we manage to overcome these 5 problems, then elections can go on successfully. I've asked colleagues in Parliament to share their experience with me. What did they do during the war? Anyway, our time is up. Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for coming. And I'll be looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much.
Me too. I'm practicing and I'm much better than